Alright, again we have some awesome news coming from Russia. Yes, awesome news not for Russia but for Ukraine, because Ukraine hit a Russian oil storage in Voronezh region and Russia used this particular one to supply their army with fuel. I'm speaking about the diesel fuel for their tanks. Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's go. So the strike happened yesterday evening. There were at least 2 of the drones which hit the target very precisely. Locals filmed those kind of the images. The fire brigades went to the place, but they were not able to eliminate the fire because it was the diesel fuel burning. Voronezh Oblast is bordering Ukraine, so it's not that far away from Ukrainian border, and Ukraine may hit this area very precisely. All of the videos from the area I published on my Telegram channel, because here I cannot upload those fully because of the censorship. You probably know that Putin changed the Russian nuclear strategy, the nuclear doctrine, and there was the response on those kind of the drone attacks with the tactical nukes involved in that new document. But the document is not obligatory for the Russian army. The doctrine is not the actual military order, it's like the exclamation of what we might do in case of that or this. Actually, this document weighs nothing, even according to the Russian laws, but Putin showed to the world that he is serious. At the same time, Peskov said again that Russia will not use the nukes if Ukraine continue to strike lots of the Russian objects. Well, maybe because Russia also launches their own Shahid drones. One of the drones hit the local building in Belarus, not in Ukraine. There was the Shahid drone, which was filmed on this CCTV camera located in some sort of the private household. And you know, Belarus KGB immediately arrested a lady, the owner of that house. Well, maybe because she posted the CCTV camera of her own camera into internet. It was really approved that Russia used the Shahid drones against Belarus as well. At the same time, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Lukashenko, said that he took the solemn decision of not to escalate the situation if some of the Ukrainian or Russian drones enter the Belarus airspace. If those cases continue, he said he will call specialists to resolve this problem peacefully. Well, Lukashenko also said that he is willing to protect Ukraine against the possible Polish intervention into the country. He said that if Poland enters Ukraine with its army, Belarus will protect its neighbor. I think that Lukashenko lives in parallel reality if he speaks like that. He also mentioned that Belarus is willing to invest their own funds in the rebuilding of Ukraine after the war is over. Guys, by the way, if you want to support the job that I do daily here on YouTube, you might join also my Patreon page. The link for it is available right in the video description below. Thank you so much for your kind support. Alright, about the Russian airfield which was hit yesterday, I thought actually guys that the airfield received tremendous damages, but it is not like that unfortunately. The fire was detected near this parking spot and honestly I see all of the airplanes on the apron are okay. Well, at least from this perspective they were not destroyed by the fire spread across the grass nearby. Well, maybe there is the shrapnel which hit those airplanes, because we know that Ukraine uses the special warheads on the drones full of shrapnel, small metal parts, and it could be true, but from this distance it's definitely hard to say. The fire also spread a little south, also towards the grass, and it touched some of the facilities nearby. Also here Russia stored something right at this angle of the taxiways. And here are probably administrative building and some of the Russian barracks. They were not hit, as you may see. So unfortunately my yesterday's assumption of the tremendous damage unfortunately didn't work out. We may see the confirmation here, and guys, I'm openly saying about it. I'm not over exaggerating the events. Yesterday there was the information from Ukrainian channels which I told you, but definitely the reality is like that. You may see it on this picture, just the grass burned. Yes, there is the question about the airplanes, about their airworthiness, but they didn't burn down. We can also see it on those pictures. Alright, now to the front lines. We have some of the news from the Kursk Oblast. There Russia took initiative and they're counterattacking Ukrainian counterattack in this place. Well, for now we have just the confirmation from the Russian side only that they've took Medvezhya village back. Medvezhya is located over here, so there were the fights ongoing between Ukraine and Russia. Now Russia does everything to stop this Ukrainian offensive, because Ukraine still has the ability to encircle the Russian group in this region. Yes, I said that Ukraine has this ability, but only with enough resources. I see that Ukraine is stuck over here for the second week. There's the high chance that this Ukrainian assault will not work as it should be. as in general the whole Kursk operation. Kursk operation uncovered lots of the weaknesses of the Russian army, of the Russian regime, but the detailed goals of this operation is yet unknown by society. The Ukrainian government tells lots of the stuff about the buffer area, about securing the Sumy city and the Sumy Oblast. By the way, today Zelensky went there. But if we take into account all of that, from the tactical perspective, this operation definitely was successful. Ukraine took lots of the territories under control, but now 100% Ukraine is not moving forward. Russia takes initiative, and they've took the ground recently over here, and now we see many of the spots of their attacks on Ukrainian positions in Kursk. During the winter time, it will be even more difficult for Ukraine to keep those positions, so my forecast that finally Ukraine will be forced to withdraw the forces from the Kursk Oblast, the forces which are crucially needed for Ukraine to secure the eastern front lines. What is also interesting that Ukraine beat a lot on this Kursk operation. We know it from the vehicles Ukraine used out there. Strikers, Leopard 2 tanks, Challenger 2 tanks, all of the new equipment was deployed in Kursk to ensure the success. Was it or is it a success from the tactical point of view? Yes, it was or it is, but strategically only time may show. By the way, this video was published today. This is the Ukrainian Challenger 2 tank, which was filmed in the Kursk Oblast. You may see this triangle sign on the side, and definitely Ukraine uses the modern tanks there, and basically all of the modern equipment. Alright, we have the positive news from the Bakhmut direction. There Ukraine went on a counterattack, taking some of the ground. We also have the confirmation about the Ukrainian strike from the Russian sources. They say that they are forced to retreat from their positions, so Ukraine took the territory up to this channel, forcing Russians to cross it to their controlled territory. But we know that Russians are gathering forces for one more strike across the channel because they're not satisfied that they were forced to retreat. Russians also tried to encircle the Nelipovka village today. They do it from the New York town, but their offensive was stopped by the Azov regiment. The video is published by the Deep State. I also shared it on my Telegram channel, and I highly recommend you to check it out because it is kind of interesting. Russia advanced with their infantry forces, armored vehicles, and all of that was kaputted. Nice. Alright, we have some breaking news that Ukraine hit the military facility of the Russian Federation in the occupied territory of Donetsk, eliminating 20 soldiers together with 6 North Korean officers, and those were there probably to check out the current battlefield between Ukraine and Russia, or maybe they did the audit before sending their engineering forces, as it was negotiated between North Korea and Russia before. Well, those 6 went into zero. And I guess it's the only positive news we have for today. The rest of the front lines are just all going in favor of Russia. Russia moved here recently, taking this territory and those territories. Also, they start to move from Vuhledar, so it was yesterday, it is today. You can see movement almost every day. The fight for Selidova will happen the next week, it's understandable. Here is the great threat for Ukrainian army. Here is also Russia will move from Vuhledar towards north, and they propel quite fast. They're now trying to attack from many of the points, causing Ukraine to disperse the forces throughout the front lines. Also in the Kupiansk direction you see this advancement of the Russian side. They almost cut Ukrainian forces in two. They also cut the most of the bridges across the Oskil River, which makes the situation worse for Ukrainian supplies. So it was yesterday, it is today. They moved here, expanding the bridgehead, and also they attack from this direction. I would say it's the new advancement of the Russian side, so they want to cross here to Lozova, encircling the Ukrainian army or causing it to retreat from the territories. So why is it happening? Why does the Ukrainian army leave the positions? Well, unfortunately, Ukrainian army has many of the problems, not just with military support from our allies, but also internal problems. Unfortunately, today the news were uncovered that the commander of 186th Separate Battalion that was used to protect Vuhledar zeroed himself, I guess, because of the situation around him and his battalion. From what I understood, according to the information which is coming to the internet from our soldiers, this battalion hasn't obtained the order to leave the positions in Vuhledar. They did it on their own. And after it, the commander, who was just 33 years old, was accused of leaving the positions. That is why, and under this huge pressure from the other commanders, he decided to do what he did. The Vadar loss was imminent. If we go back a little, Like 1 week ago or something, you may see that Russia had already crossed the road which supplied Vuhledar. That's the only reliable supply line. And after it, obviously they start to attack the city more and more, and here they created the risk for the encirclement of Vuhledar. And even for me, it is understandable that it's time to withdraw the forces. It was time already 1 week ago to withdraw the forces from Vuhledar. But from what we understand, the Ukrainian armed forces in the region, the 186th Brigade, which defended Vuhledar, didn't obtain the order. The Vuhledar itself was demolished by the Russian aviation gliding bombs, and our guys had the risk of the encirclement. That's why they took the only right solution to withdraw from the place. And later on, the high Ukrainian military command said that this withdrawal was planned. It's not a disinformation, guys, it's the real situation. The withdrawal was so late that the part of the Ukrainian forces, after all, went to the Russian trap. And several of the Ukrainian soldiers were even eliminated by the Russian war criminals. The video of it was shared in internet. Here I will not share it, and on Telegram as well. It's too terrific. You know, recently something went strangely wrong with the command of the Ukrainian army. It seems like our forces received the order to stand to death in those settlements. Just to remind you, the same situation happened in Karlivka. Then the commander of our battalion defending the area was forced to withdraw from the positions without any order. And later on, that commander was even accused for leaving the positions, for miscomplaining the order. But we know that Russians attacked from many of the areas, and they actually encircled already Karlivka. And only during the night time, our guys with the battle were able to break through, also with losses. Guys, I'm reviewing the front lines for 2.5 years, and I know the story, what usually happens, and those cases didn't happen before. The thing is that the proper defense should have been organized, but it's not the task of ordinary Ukrainian soldiers, it's the task of the Ukrainian management. Now the only defense lines are mostly the settlements themselves, where the battles are ongoing. If we speak about the fields, well, they're usually the trenches which soldiers built on their own, and those are mainly useless against the aviation gliding bombs or artillery fire from the Russian side. That's why Russia propelled so fast, because they were able to break the main defense. For example, in Avdiivka, there were definitely trenches prepared, because basically it was the border between the self-proclaimed DPR and Ukraine for many years, and I would say that the previous Ukrainian government took the situation more seriously. That's why they built more and more defense lines here. It was really hard for Russia to break through them. They lost thousands of troops here, so it was very important for Ukraine to defend the settlement, but after now it's almost the free way for them to reach Pokrovsk or Mirnograd, because the defense lines, the robust defense lines, are just absent. You know, even in Kursk, then Ukraine started its offensive, Russia started to build lots of the defense lines near Kurchatov nuclear power plant and so on. But after Russia took Avdiivka under control, Ukraine didn't do the same steps, even though Russians were quite far away from Pokrovsk. Guys, this information is spread also by Ukrainian volunteers, Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian publics, independent groups as well. All of that are pro-Ukrainian sources, and they want to raise the awareness about what is happening. It wasn't just the only brigade in Vuhledar, also the 72nd separate brigade, named after the Black operations. It's not about the skin color, guys, it's just the name of the unit. So here journalists said she spoke with the soldiers and said that there was no official, it's not team, it's the order to leave the city, but commanders on the ground saw that everything was over. So Russians tried to encircle Vuhledar. So no matter what, the commanders of the local brigades tried to organize the exit, but it was not without losses. As I told you exactly, this information comes from Ukrainian channels, not the Russian ones. I want you guys to understand the truth, and we have this aftermath after several days then Russia occupied Vuhledar. The idea here is to learn mistakes to avoid them in the future, but I do it almost every time that Ukraine loses the city or the big important settlement, but the mistakes happen again and again. Unfortunately, it means that the Ukrainian army absolutely needs reforms. And those are also Ukrainian news from the Mykolaiv region, so Spilne Mykolaiv, so Public News Mykolaiv, and they report that the soldiers of 123rd Brigade of the Territorial Defense went on temporarily, and they voluntarily left their military branches. As they say, the command was going to send them to the most hot spots without the proper preparation. The fighters are protesting in order to draw the attention to insufficient training and lack of weapons to participate the hostiles in Donetsk direction. Again, it shows that the Ukrainian army absolutely needs reforms. The structure of the Ukrainian army should be changed. The commanders and the high command should also be changed for more competent ones. And recently Umerov, the defense minister of Ukrainian army, laid off or dismissed some of the generals. Maybe it might help, but we'll see. And I wouldn't say that those are the great news. Also, we had the information that the Ukrainian army wants even lower the terms for the training, mandatory training for the newcomers or mobilized Ukrainian men. I wonder what could be even lower than 1 month of the training. Well, our commanders on the front lines, they complain about definitely the poor training of the Ukrainian men. It's a very complicated question. Partially it was solved last year, then Ukraine got more resources, so Ukrainian soldiers were sent also to European countries for the longer training. And today then the new soldiers are needed right here, right now. They do not usually go through this long process of the training. And obviously the Russian bots shared the information about the Ukrainian desert, as they say, and also the failure of Ukrainian army in Vuhledar, telling absolute lies that just 8% got out. There is no information about those numbers, so bots start to exploit. So the Russian propaganda, I call them bots, tries to serve the current news, saying that Ukraine collapsed speeds up. Wow. Well, actually, Ukraine will not collapse, and we already understand that. The thing is, Ukraine needs to hold for a very, very long time, and for that we need the support from our allies and to reform Ukrainian army as well. And also those both share the anti-Israeli stuff and anti-democrat stuff as well. And guys, some of the journalists, I wouldn't say that they are so independent, because Ukrainian truth media, yes, that's the name of the source, was more independent before the war started. And they came out with this article that there was the special company, there is actually, it's called Ukraine Spetstechnika, and it was used to buy weapons for the Ukrainian military intelligence, for GUR. And Budanov is in charge of that organization, but recently the Ukrainian Defense Ministry took away that company from Ukrainian military intelligence, and now all of the purchases are going through the Defense Ministry of Ukraine. And this particular media source says that GUR overpaid the companies by the tens of millions of euros for weapons, so they bought the weapons for the higher price than it should be. Well, what I think about this personal case, my personal idea or conspiracy theory, that someone, yes, you probably know, that man wants to get rid of Budanov and put his own man in charge of the Ukrainian intelligence, because Budanov acts more or less independently. I wouldn't say that all of the operations of GUR are going according to plan. No, there were some of the mishaps, but still GUR, I think, should be more independent. And I definitely think that someone ordered this article to get rid of Budanov, to show that there were some of the schemes in GUR, that Budanov could be corrupt and he should leave his position. Well, maybe it will happen in the coming days like that, because the pressure on him is enormous, really. Even though, like last week, there was clarification from the Ukrainian government that they don't want to get rid of Budanov, but with those kind of the publications, especially from Ukrainskaya Pravda, we see that everything is not that bright, and there's definitely a conflict between Budanov and, let's say, president's office. Google with its advertisements. I was looking for the Trump's watches. I want to check out the model and why is it so expensive, but now I have the advertisement for the watches here on every page. Sorry guys, we're in. The Forbes Ukrainian magazine also wrote the article about Budanov, the defense ministry, chaos or political ambitions, they ask. Here lower we have more information. The article says that Umerov dismissed deputies of Budanov recently already. So definitely there is the conflict. I'm 100% sure about it. The thing is whether Budanov is capable to stay in charge of Ukrainian military intelligence after this enormous Russia's pressure. By the way, there is also the pressure on Syrskyi as well. It started not long time ago, then some of the MPs from the presidential party actually start to blame Syrskyi for the wrongdoing. You know, guys, after all, I don't want to check how deep this rabbit hole definitely is, but I want for you to understand that it's not a perfect situation for the fighting country, especially with this huge enemy as the Russian Federation. So I hope our Western allies are able to influence this internal sandpit fight and will push Ukraine in the proper direction. Kind of the interesting video filmed by Ukrainian police and investigators. They investigated the corruption scheme in which this guy was involved. He is the medical official of one of the hospitals in one of the areas of Ukraine. And just look at the amount of the funds he was able to bribe from the ordinary Ukrainian man. What he did with his commission, well, he faked the medical papers for some of the individuals who didn't want to get into Ukrainian army. And people, as you see, are willing to pay a huge amount of money just not to go to the front lines. Well, there are still people who voluntarily go to Ukrainian army, but those are much less compared to what it was at the very beginning of the full-scale war. Now Ukraine mostly forces men to go to the army, and because of that the motivational level dropped, and it is true, guys. And there were also many of the cases with the recruitment centers of Ukrainian army, then the heads of those also took the bribes, and later on they bought the real estate, fancy cars, yes, by the time then there is a war in their country. Well, for civilian it's one thing, but for military to take the bribes, you know, it's just terrible. Well, the good thing here that Ukrainian police is working and they were able to uncover this scheme, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure about it. And also this guy got Rolex with diamonds and gold, plus the white gold. Well, this thing is really fancy. But even this one could be cheaper than the Trump's watches. But you may ask me where Russia gets its soldiers. Well, over here they pay enormous sums of money for those. The Russian economy prints rubles as hell, and usually soldiers, yes, initially they get this sum, but later on, no, they usually kaput it on front lines. So for example, in Krasnodar, the Russian soldier receives 1,400,000 rubles plus 400,000 from the federal budget of the Russian Federation, so totally it's 1,800,000 rubles. And it's just a single payment, then the soldier signs the contract. It is roughly $19,000 for the Krasnodar Oblast. If we take Moscow, for example, the number is even greater. And later on the salary is from 210,000 rubles per month, which is roughly $2,200. And it's depends on the soldier's skills, whether he served in the Russian army before. So this is the main reason why Russia still has volunteers, because the main part of Russia lives in poverty, and this amount of money is just crazy for average Russian, outside Moscow and St. Petersburg, obviously. That's why they live in their towns and villages, brainwashed by this Russian propaganda. They see this sum, it's like a lottery ticket, they may buy lots of the stuff, they may also close their debts in the banks, they understand that they may lose their lives, but nevertheless they go. But you know, even with those sums, Russia now struggles to get new army men into the army. Still, there are some of the volunteers, but that flow is much less compared to what it was 1 year ago. That's why I'm sure that Russia will announce a new mobilization. I think they will do it maybe this winter or spring. Now let's go to the other news, which could be more positive for Ukraine. The ex-secretary of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, yes, he retired now, and he is able to say wherever he wants, but still I think he has some of the influence, and via him the NATO bloc may speak openly now, because he is not the official representative of NATO. So immediately after he resigned, he told that Ukraine should be in NATO. And there's the prospect that Ukraine enters NATO with the current territories under control by Ukraine. That's what I'm telling you about, guys. That's the only solution with limited support of Ukraine with weaponry. Well, actually, all of the Ukraine will join NATO, as Stoltenberg says, but the 5th article for defense will go just for this territory which Ukraine controls. Here I've took Poland and Moldova, sorry about it. So the best case for Ukraine would be to obtain enough weaponry weaponry, like huge amount of the weaponry, and believe me, if that amount will go to Ukraine, lots of the Ukrainians will go voluntarily to fight against occupiers once again, because now we have just a limited support, and Ukrainians understand that if they're sent somewhere on the east, the chances for them to survive is really low. But if you have enough weapons, enough training, you go with more volunteers, and the Ukrainian army in that case may push the Russian army further away. But since Ukraine is very limited and our enemy has enormous resources still, the plan is to let Ukraine in NATO. That plan is also not that bright as it could be, because there are some of the countries like Turkey and Hungary which doesn't see Ukraine in this bloc so far, and it might take lots of the time to convince those countries for their positive response. Remember the case with Sweden and how long Turkey didn't want to give the green light, as well as Hungary, by the way. With the Ukraine it will be even more difficult, because here Turkey is the trade partner of the Russian Federation and Hungary's current regime is absolutely pro-Russian one. And we also know that Slovakian Prime Minister Fico leans towards Russian views. If war ends, I'll restore relations with Russia, Slovakia's Fico says. Yeah. You know, guys, after Ukraine deoccupied all of those territories of Kiev, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv and Kherson, I was maybe too much positive. Here the situation is not that bright as it was at the end of 2022. So if we speak about the realism and the current resources, Ukraine should absolutely join NATO and the war should be stopped at the current stage. It doesn't mean that Ukraine will lose those territories. No. Russia will collapse. This process is just imminent. We just need to wait and secure Ukraine for that event. It will happen 100%. The Russian society is too divided, and the destiny of Russia will be the same as the destiny of the Soviet Union. Good news from Switzerland, they sent some of the engineering vehicles to Ukraine, not to Ukrainian army, because Switzerland is the neutral country, but those vehicles could be used to clear debris when Russian missiles or drones hit the infrastructure of Ukraine to save people's lives. And also they've donated lots of the firefighting equipment, so Switzerland helps Ukraine as it can. As for the country neutrality, it will be neutral even in case of the Third World War. It is understandable. It's the country policy, it will not change, and also Swiss military is not that big to change something. Even with potential military support, if we assume it, it will not play a great role, for example, in Ukrainian war. So this equipment is also good. The country does something. By the way, Azerbaijan also supports Ukraine with humanitarian equipment. Kind of the interesting warning from occupied Crimea. From their social media groups, they expect the massive strike of ballistic missiles in the coming days. There is also a danger of the drone boats at the main target, the Crimean Bridge. Thermal power plants and airfields. Sounds nice. Now Israel performs the ground operation in Lebanon. It's quite limited for now, but nevertheless they ambush some of the local positions of Hezbollah, and they find lots of the stuff there. Well, mostly Iranian-made stuff. About the strike of Iranian missiles on Israeli military airfields, definitely they try to hit the shelters for F-35s, but those are really robust. The ballistic missiles hit nearby, but nevertheless I would say that those are precise shots if we consider that those missiles fly for a very long range. And there is one more shelter, so this one actually was damaged. I wonder if the airplane was inside by the time. Alright, we have the report from the Israeli media that the new Hezbollah leader was captured the last night because of the strikes. It happened again in Beirut, so if the information is correct, he was in power for a record short period of time. My friends, now please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so you help me a lot, and as always I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.